All right, welcome back, everyone. The time is now 2 p.m. Eastern. So up next, we're joined by George Good, FTA Senior Accident Investigator. We have Martin Shutt, Rail Safety Program Manager in the Office of Homeland Security, Emergency Management and Rail Safety with the Maryland Department of Transportation, and Deputy Chief Safety Officer Forrest Freeland with the Maryland Transit Administration. This panel will cover Rail Transit Agency's accident notification process based on the 2-hour notification requirement and the phases after the notification. Please welcome George, Martin, and Forrest.
Thank you, Roderick. Appreciate the introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another virtual workshop. I look forward to the day when we can all meet in person again. It's really missed seeing some familiar faces and meeting some new ones. This COVID pandemic's been a challenge for everyone, but the important work that you do is really recognized and appreciated by the FTA, and what you do to keep both the passengers and your employees safe is really important, and your success is our success, and we really appreciate it. Next slide, please. So my name is George Good, Senior Accident Investigator. We're just going to talk about the accident notification investigation requirements. A lot of this is going to be just a refresher for most of you because you're pretty well versed in these subjects, but we'll go over it and hopefully maybe you'll pick something up that you didn't know. Next slide, please. So we're just going to talk about an overview of what we will go over is the authority, accident notifications, the FTA 2-hour accident notification guide, accident investigation requirements, reports, and the Rail Transit Agency investigation requirements. Next slide, please. So these authorities here are for the accident notification. The 674-27 is the program requirements for notification. And we'll just highlight some points here. The program must establish the requirements for the transit agency to notify the SSOA, the time limits, the methods, and the information that you must submit in your notification. 674-33 related to the notification itself, the requirement is to notify both the SSO and the FTA for accidents. The criteria and thresholds should be well defined. You'll have them in your program and also in the FTA guidance. 674-33, again, we have a few properties that have shared use with the FRA. In any instance for those shared use properties, if you notify the FRA, you also have to notify the FTA of those when that's done. Now, we also wanted to bring up your program, both the transit agency and state safety oversight should be aware and address other federal reporting requirements. So the NTSB has a requirement for operators of railroads. And I just wanted to point out that the definition for railroads includes rapid transit, light rails, heavy rails, other types of rapid transit. So that also includes you. Next slide, please. So we've gone over in a lot of detail talking about accidents, and I know the past few workshops we've really gotten into it, but accidents fall under the umbrella of events along with incidents and occurrences. And one of the important things to note, although it's the minimum requirement to notify the FTA of accidents, when it comes to incidents or occurrences, your SSO may have additional notification requirements that there'll only be notifications to them, but that's within their purview of what incidents or occurrences they want to know about. You also see in Appendix A of 674 that it also references accidents, incidents, occurrences, and gives you a few examples of those. Next slide, please. 2-hour accident notification guidance. One of the important thing I would like to note here is we recommend you do it by email. And the reason for this is when you send an email We recommend you do it either to the TOC directly with a CC to your SSO, or to the SSO with a CC to the TOC. This is important. That way the SSO knows that we've been notified and what information you provided us. Their program, at a minimum, you should be providing in the TOC notifications any information that's required by your state safety oversight program. And since this does go to the TOC, which is outside of your agencies, and the SSO, others that receive these notifications may not be as familiar with your operation. So if you have like more than one mode, you may know the accident occurred at this station, so you know what line that is or what mode that is, but others don't. So when you do the notification, if you can either add the line or the mode, that would also be helpful for the TOC and others outside of your organizations or they're directly familiar with your operations. Also, just one thing, it also is useful when you're reporting substantial damage if you reference if it was to the transit vehicle, to the POV, or both. That's also useful information. Next slide, please. For accident investigation requirements, some of the important things are bulleted here out of the rule to identify the thresholds, the internal investigation and the processes and the roles, how you're going to handle findings and recommendations, including NTSB or FTA findings or recommendations. And the SSO themselves are ultimately responsible for the sufficiency and thoroughness of all investigations. And they must do especially in the case where the transit agency is doing the investigation, the SSO is required to do an independent review of the findings of causation. And then you should also have a good process how you're going to coordinate the investigations. Next slide, please. So accident investigation reports, again, the authorities should be clearly identified. The policies should be identified. Everyone should know what they are and work from the same policies. The reporting requirements, like I said, the SSO can require you to exceed the accident requirements and be involved in those other types of investigations. How you communicate together, both the transit agency corrective action plan, and most importantly, especially when the RTA is doing the investigation, the SSO must formally adopt the report. And any issues with dissent or concurrence with the report also should be closely coordinated together with the SSO and RTA. Next slide, please. So, real transit agency investigation requirements. Now this is PTAS, but I'm just going to read this one because it kind of highlights everything in one definition for both accidents and other types of investigations. So an investigation means the process of determining the causal and contributing factors of an accident, incident, or hazard for the purpose of preventing reoccurrence and mitigating risk. So that's why we're doing this, and that's probably the most important thing. And again, you'll see another reference to causal factors. Next slide, please. Well, thank you. I appreciate your attention. And at this time, we have some of your peers, Martin and Forrest, that are going to do a presentation on their how they coordinate and work together. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, George. Welcome all. I'm Martin Shutt, SSO Program Manager for the state of Maryland. My colleague, Forrest Freeland, and I will be presenting accident investigation, oversight and best practices, and lessons learned. Next slide, please. Forrest.
Yep, I'm Forrest Freeland here, Deputy Chief Safety Officer of Operations over MDOT MTA. Next slide. So, good afternoon, everyone. Good morning, depending on where you are in the country. I just want to say thanks on behalf of Martin and I, to FTA for allowing us to be here today to discuss accident investigation. So let's get started. Like everyone here, we've learned some lessons since Part 674 was released and have adapted to new FTA requirements like the NTD and SSOA reporting interface and the revised accident reporting criteria. As a result, we have instituted what might be some best practices under our accident investigation responsibilities over the past couple of years. These include improvements to the SSOA program standard requirements and procedures, and revising the MTA's ASP and reporting forms to accomplish the goals you see here. We'll talk more about those enhancements today, and it will be important for us to continue to adapt as SMS matures here at MTA. Next slide.
Yes, regarding accident notifications, we've taken several initiatives to clarify and build upon the new accident definitions that were established in Part 674. The definitions have many nuances with exclusions and inclusions. FTA has published supplementary guidance on which was released following the final rule of 674. Last year, we added that FTA guidance right alongside the accident criteria in our program standard. This made it easier for safety officers to reference when determining whether an event met the criteria of an accident. Second, the SSO determined that there are other types of serious events needing deeper investigations and oversights. These events, as you see, are listed to the right, such as the door opening during train movement or runaway maintenance vehicles. Excuse me. We classify these as serious occurrences and are requiring the same level of complete, thorough investigation and formal SSOA adoption, the same requirements as we do for FTA classified accidents. Last fall, the SSO and MTA held a workshop together which covered all the most recent program standard changes to make sure RTA and SSOA were in sync and understood these event definitions. Finally, the FTA accident investigator provides preferences and guidance on some questionable reporting items, and we pass those along to MTA to discuss as needed. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Martin. So let's touch on some of the tools MTA uses as part of the accident investigation process. To start, MTA worked with the SSOA to refine the Office of Safety's accident report templates. We expanded upon the categories to include critical items such as fatigue factors, drug and alcohol test compliance, and obtaining police reports as needed. We also have drop-down selections in many of these boxes, which allows our various safety officers to provide more consistent reports. The SSOA also now requires that MTA's primary probable cause category be restricted to the same drop-down selections that FTA allows in the SSOA's annual report in the SSOR tool. You can see here that we created a drop-down selection to ensure compliance with that requirement as well. We're hoping that avoids a few of the issues or future reconciliation needed between the NTD and SSOR reporting. In addition, we have implemented biweekly accident investigation update meetings, which allow us as a staff to discuss open investigations and work through any challenges that may arise. We utilize an event tracking log that enables us to analyze the different event types to identify trends, and we are working on fine-tuning a system that will send out auto-generated email reminders, which will help us to stay on track with reporting deadlines. Next slide.
Yes, in order to create mitigations to prevent reoccurrences, it's important to further analyze the probable cause to determine the root causes. The probable cause alone doesn't establish why something happened. So in addition to the probable cause, the SSOA has encouraged the MTA to also determine one or more root causes that explain why and how the probable the contributing causes happen. For example, declaring an accident to be a result of a rules violation, human performance failure does not explain why or how the employee failed. Rules violations may occur because the rules, procedures are unclear or inconsistent to follow, The employee has never been properly trained on the procedure or other possibilities. Causal factors have determined if the further interviews, document reviews, analysis as part of the investigation, contributing factors will lead the transit agency to determine appropriate caps proposed as part of the investigation report package. As a method to resolve disagreements between the RTA and the SSOA, it's included in our rail standard. It's important to note that the classification of factors is not important as to assuring the hazard is documented accurately, described in a cap, and is sufficiently mitigated. Next slide, please.
So when it comes to reviewing reports and similar communication, the SSOA program managers and contractor support either provide formal comments or an adoption letter for each submission. If MTA does receive comments, we will review and make any corrections needed, further clarify information in the report, or further investigate if SSOA feels there's additional information pertinent to the investigation that needs to be looked into further. When caps are identified during investigations, we complete a cap submission form for each cap proposal, similar to the one you see here. This ensures that the numbering and all required cap components are present. At the time of cap approval, the SSOA will lay out the verification documents that will be expected at the time of cap closure, so that we are all on the same page about the final deliverables. We also communicate further if needed, of course, through one-on-one phone calls, which Martin and I have quite frequently, or through MTA's monthly hazard meetings that take place for each mode. Next slide.
Yes, MTA produces a whole series of key performance indicators that are reported up through the MTA administrator. To monitor, last year the SSO began issuing key performance indicators to MTA that reflect their status of improvement in event and cat-related submissions to the SSO. This includes month-to-month comparison on whether MTA is meeting deadlines for final reports within 45 days and is revising final reports 15 days after receiving the SSO comments. MTA Office of Safety has been reviewing these KPIs closely. We believe it's helpful to put performance and efficiency into perspective. Next slide, please. Okay, so we hope this insight into our recent accident investigation program improvements has been helpful. Now, thank you. George?
Oh, thank you very much, Martin and Forrest. At this time, we'll take any questions, and Maisha will be working with us, and we'll try to answer any questions that you have.
Okay, thank you, George. Our first question is, can FAA expand on a rail agency's NTSB notifications under 49 CFR 840 and the SSOA's role in the NTSB notification? Does the SSOA need to police those NTSB notifications? In a similar manner, we are required to police the FTA SSOA notifications.
Yeah, it used to be a requirement for the transit agencies, to have a process for other types of federal notifications. And the SSOA should be looking at and approving those programs. But as far as, and your program should probably address I would think for an NTSB, the SSO would also want to know that, know about it. But the SSO is going to get the notification. I'm not really sure in the best process of who enforces it, but if your program says it's a requirement, then you should be enforcing your program.
Okay, great.
Hope that helps.
Yeah.
George, if I may step in here real quick. I know you're on the technical and operational side, but if I may step in here to just kind of add some clarity to that. Again,
Sure.
Everyone, this is Patrick Neiman's Chief of the Program Management Division. And as George stated, George is on our Program Operation Division side, more of a technical side. And on my division, we are the ones that ensure compliance with the processes that the state safety oversight agencies carry out for their oversight. So to the point of should an SSOA police or ensure that rail transit agencies let them know about notifications such as NTSB, and the answer to that is yes. Remember, in Part 674, as a requirement of your program management, you are to enforce all local, state, and federal rules. And this is a federal rule under 49 CFR Part 840 that NTSB has, that rail transit agencies should also notify them of any fatalities. Part 840 for NTSB has no differentiation between railroad and rail transit. To them, they group it all under railroad. So if there are any fatalities, that must be reported to NTSB. So the SSOAs should also ensure that that is enforceable under their program standard.
Thank you for that clarification, Patrick. All right, next question. There used to be a dollar amount or threshold for substantial damages. Is there a dollar value now?
When you look at the NTD reporting and the FTA requirement, that has been replaced in 674 with a substantial damage has replaced the dollar value. Under the old rule, it used to be 25K, which still applies to bus, but for rail, the substantial damage, especially in a collision, is the new requirement. And there's a definition both in our guidance and in the NTD for what substantial damage is, and then also what it is not.
Okay, thank you. Next question, who conducts the investigation? Safety staff or operations and maintenance?
I can take that one. For us, again, in the program standard, the process is spelled out. We have the RTA to do the investigation, and the maintenance is just one part of it. You have different departments that put out certain reports for the investigation. You collect all the reports. The RTA puts the reports together to a preliminary and then a final report. And then the SSO reviews the report and makes any comments or recommendations as needed. The caps are submitted and have to be approved by the SSOA. So in our case, normally the RTA does it. We do have it in our program standard that, if we deem it that we will do the investigation on our own, or, we've actually done joint investigations with the RTA, and all that's spelled out in the program standard.
Yeah, I can also add to that. From our level, at the RTA, we do have, safety officers assigned to each mode, to our metro system and our light rail system. And if an event happens while they're on duty, they will take the lead in the investigation. We also have an on-call duty rotation for safety officers. And if, those are obviously through our non-business hours. And if an event happens at that time, the safety officer will be the lead investigator on any event that occurs. And as Martin was saying, they will work with the operations staff, the maintenance staff, or any other departments or any other, players, if you will, to kind of analyze the information and kind of, start the investigation and really move forward from there. So.
Thank you. Next question. Could you discuss how root causes and probable causes might be confused, perhaps by using some real life examples?
Forrest, would you like to take that one? I know since you do most of the investigations.
Yeah, so I think, when Martin referenced in the report, a lot of the times, somebody will, probable cause, an operator failed to be aware, or training failed. Maybe they're, we put it on training, for whatever reason, they need to be retrained, or that's kind of identified sometimes as the probable cause, but there's a lot more under that, right? So you have to continue to ask that question, why, and really dig into the root cause of that. Maybe our training department was lacking staff that class period or that month that the operator was going through, and didn't have the opportunity to get a full session. Not saying that it's a real life example. I'm trying to come up with some, but
Yeah,
that could be kind of
I can help you out a little, Forrest. We have been through several discussions over the last year or so, from the standard change, Forrest and myself, discuss these things. A real life example, and it happens a lot, that, we have a pedestrian that's crossing the crossing and gets struck by a train. And when he's walking across, they have earphones on, and the first thing people go to is, well, he had headphones on, he was listening to music, he wasn't paying attention, and if you just stop there, it doesn't go into, the other questions is, is the station properly marked? Are there signs to look both directions? Where is the ticket machine in reference to where they're entering the track, those kind of things. So, for somebody to, normally just say, well, it's because they had headphones on. Unless you were there, they might not have been playing them, and we do come to find out that there are other causes that really did affect the person getting struck. So, you really have to dig deep and go in and investigate thoroughly before you can just assume the causal versus the root cause. And again, it's not worth really arguing and fighting about, because what's really necessary is to capture it, describe it, document it, and then mitigate it through corrective action procedures.
Okay, thank you very much. The next question is any consideration being given to simplifying the notification criteria to make compliance easier and standardizing the resulting data?
The notification requirements have been in place for years. A lot of it's worked with the NTD. There's not any plans right now to make any changes, and it would probably require rulemaking to do it, so it wouldn't be a fast process.
Okay. Thank you. Next question. In the 2021 SSOR User Manual, Table 21, Event Basic Reporting Requirements states, as part of collisions resulting in substantial damage, that damage resulting from a collision that equals or exceeds $25,000 should be reported as a collision. Will the 2022 SSOR NTD Reporting Manual be reconciled with the NTD Glossary and to our notification guide?
Let me take that, because that's part of my program with the SSOR tool. And the answer to that is we are actually going through that revision now to ensure that we're meeting that. A couple of things to remember in the presentation that George had earlier. There are Part 674 reporting requirements, and there are NTD reporting requirements. So the 674 requirements are within a 2-hour time frame under events, whereas incidents are to be reported to the NTD within 30 days. So we are working to reconcile and make sure that the two pair up. Whatever we have as far as the notifications under Part 674 is the same, and using the same definitions as NTD, because there is some disparity in some cases, and we are working to clarify that. So in your user manual for the state safety oversight agencies for submitting your data for 2021, you should have clarity there by then. And that manual or update should be submitted to you by December or January timeframe.
Thank you, Patrick.
Next question. Why is FTA so concerned about receiving notifications for events that don't meet the criteria? In the past, our motto was, if in doubt, make the notification.
Well,
Good.
well, that's the whole purpose of the MAP 21, to provide a more enhanced oversight and enforcement authority to the states to oversee this program. Reporting what someone felt was reportable is not a consistent manner for reporting, because with 31 state safety oversight programs and 60 plus transit agencies, there was no parity there. So that is why the rule is specific in what you report. And that way we can make sure that everyone is on the same page in reporting what needs to be reported so that we can capture. Now, the point of capturing that data is so that we can work on patterns and trends and practices. Now, one of the things that Administrator Fernandez said earlier, if you as the state or the Rail Transit Agency feels that we can have improvements to something, there is an RFI out, and I would urge you to please make your comments there on whatever improvements that we could have. But ultimately, safety is our priority, and that's why we want to have a standardized reporting mechanism.
Yeah, and to add to what Patrick was saying, we use the TOC to intake all the notifications, and they receive notifications from all the modes within DOT and other sources. So our agreement with them is only to accept the accidents, so we don't want to overwhelm them with incidents or occurrences that aren't really reportable under the rule.
Thank you, George and Patrick. Next question. Could you discuss any involvement in incident investigation during testing and commissioning activity pre-passenger operation?
We're currently in discussions on addressing this in a better way to provide more guidance on how to address it. Hopefully, we'll come out with some formal guidance related to that. But right now, it's kind of a gray area, I think, that needs to be addressed.
Okay, thank you, George. Next question. As the SSO, do you require that the RTA request approval of a cap for every probable cause and root cause identified in the report?
Yes. What happens is during an investigation report, the final report, there are findings, and for those findings, we presently do request the RTA to come up with corrective action plans. Those are discussed through, once it's recognized and taken through the process. We discuss it at a hazard review meeting, and those hazards that can't be mitigated quickly become a corrective action, and the RTA submits those corrective actions to the SSO, and we go through them and either approve or make comments on them. And then once they meet the satisfaction of the SSO, they become caps, and that's how that's handled. The main thing is to recognize the hazards or potential hazards and assess them. And then through that assessment, that's where they either become mitigations or they become corrective actions. Is there anything else you'd like to add, Forrest?
Yeah, Martin, I think you covered it all. I would just say, some of our probable cause categories could be something like, imprudent customer actions, right? So, something happens maybe at our metro station, or a customer or a passenger did something kind of out of our control. And when we do a review, we do an investigation, we find that, well, everything MTA had in place to control that, as for safety and, operations, everything, that was all working. That was all fine. Everything performed the way it should. So sometimes there isn't a corrective action for every single probable cause listed, I would say. So I don't know if that helps.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Next question. What is your preferred method for initial event notification?
Well, I think, I have to agree with George. It's been tried a couple different ways. Real life, there's changeovers in the safety department, and some of these acts, definitely a notification to FTA is something new to the RTAs. So I think it's been a growing process to, that the RTA actually had changed to adapt to, doing it by email. Like George said, it notifies everybody and it's in writing. The time is there. Everybody understands who got notified. So to me, as time goes along, my preference would be email. Forrest, you want to elaborate?
Yeah, absolutely, Martin. So, I know, we've had conversations with George, and, email is the preferred method, and we take we do everything we can to definitely adhere to that and kind of go towards that direction. There are some times, when an event happens, say on our light rail line, it's right next to the I-83 corridor, which is, if you're familiar with Baltimore, it's pretty much in the woods, right in the our light rail line with overhead catenary system, right in the woods. And sometimes we have trees that take down our catenary systems, disable trains, and which obviously results in substantial damage and requires notification. Sometimes you can be out there for quite a while. I've had safety officers be out there for hours, and at that point it's hard to send an email, right? So they are able to safely step off of the main line and head back to their vehicle and make a phone call. So sometimes we have to use that method. It just kind of sometimes all depends on the situation. We've had times where we had a unfortunate accident down in our central business district down our CBD, and it was an all-day event. We had a lot of folks out there, and what we had was another safety manager was back in the office, and we actually asked him to gather all the information, talk with our safety officers on the scene, and provide a formal email notification, as he was able to do that for us. So it really does all depend, and we will, we do try to go with the preferred method of email, but again, sometimes those situations, as everyone here knows, in the safety world, you get into those things where you just have to kind of get it done as it is in whatever situation you're in. So, so that helps.
One thing I'd like to add to this conversation is, although the FTA notification, we recommend the email be, and that usually also goes to probably the SSO chain of command, but many times a lot of SSOs will have an on-call person, and they may, in addition to the email, need a phone call within that 2 hours to give them an opportunity to respond to the accident and be either investigate or be part of the investigation. So you may actually, for the SSO, may require both, and probably should, and especially in the cases where they're involved in the investigations.
And that's our normal procedure. The MTA does phone calls and then follow up formally.
Okay, thank you very much. Next question. Why is there a 30 to 45-day lag between NTD uploads and when the SSOA sees the event in SSOR?
Patrick, do you want to take that one? I'm not really sure.
So that is a misconception. So the SSOR and the NTD are actually on the same platform. So it is actually minutes as opposed to days. So if an RTA has not uploaded an event into NTD yet, then you're not going to see it in the SSOR. So what I would encourage is for state safety oversight agencies, if you don't see an event in your SSOR tool, follow up with the RTA to see if they have in fact loaded it up through NTD.
Okay, thank you, Patrick. Next question. If passengers are evacuated to the roadbed in a controlled way with no threat of life safety, is this a reportable evacuation? There was another discrepancy with the NTD/SSO guidance.
Yeah, I can speak to that. The NTD requirements don't completely match the rule requirements. If you look at the rule for accident, it says for a life safety reason. But the NTD still wants to know capture data on people that were evacuated to the roadway. Say the train breaks down and they have to walk people to the station. Those things don't meet the life safety criteria for accident. So there is a difference there. The SSOR tool should only pull in accidents that where they've selected it was for a life safety reason.
So yeah, so to that point, I think, Maisha, the question was if they are evacuated through what manner?
To a roadbed, to the roadbed.
Okay, so if you're being evacuated, that's the whole point. And if you are being evacuated for whatever the root cause is of that evacuation, the only thing that we need to see based on the SSR rule is that you made notification that there was an evacuation. The expectation in this case is not that that the SSOA should ask for an investigation report. The only thing that the SSOA should be looking at when there is an evacuation for life safety reasons was the proper evacuation protocols utilized.
Oh, thank you. Next question. Can you clarify reporting of fatalities or serious injury related to crimes and criminal activities? For example, a patron kills another at a station. Is it immediately reportable as a fatality or serious injury, or just to NTD because it's related to a security/criminal activity?
In that case, it would just be to the NTD. And in our 2-hour accident notification guidance, we address crimes and assaults and homicides that they're not they don't count as an accident. And there's a few exceptions, like if a person was assaulted and pushed into the train and there was a collision with the train, that would reach the accident threshold because it involved that collision with the train. Or if they fell on the track and hit the third rail and died from being pushed in.
Thank you, George. Next question. Do you require caps for hazards that are in a lower risk category?
Presently, we do. Again, it's when it's assessed, it may be, at a higher level, maybe a 1 or 2. There's certain mitigations that may be put in place to reduce it to, a 3. But if the hazard still exists and it can go further, say it's a matter of finances, that it'll take a while to get some funding for it, or some type of a project that needs time for construction. There still is a corrective action that, that to get it to the lowest level, that's acceptable. That may be at a higher level, a 3, but to eliminate the hazard altogether or get it to the lowest level, sometimes there are caps that are related to that. Yes.
Thank you so much. I'm not seeing any more questions at this time.
And with that said, and thank you, Maisha, one of the things on my side and my division in conducting compliance audits of state safety oversights, direct oversight of rail transit agencies, when it comes to investigations, one of the main areas that we focus on and we have seen or made key observations or findings is related to the sufficiency and the thoroughness of investigation reports. That is a key thing that my team focus on when they conduct these audits. And what that means with the sufficiency and the thoroughness of reports is, did the report cover everything it should have? Did you do all the interviews you needed? Did you gather all the evidence that you needed to gather? And then ultimately, when you're looking for causation, that goes back to the point of causation versus what the root cause is. Did you do a thorough enough investigation to ensure that you got down to what the root cause or the true causation was? And from there, did the transit agency and or the state safety oversight agency identify any potential caps or direct the transit agencies to develop cap? And with investigation reports, the ultimate thing to remember is investigation reports are the responsibility of the state. And the state delegates the investigation authority to the rail transit agencies. But ultimately, it is the state's report. That is why the state must adopt the report. And in cases where the rail transit agency and the state disagree, there must be some type of a resolution dispute process. And then if it is not agreed upon, then there can be written dissent to the disagreement. But I wanted to cover that out and make that known, but because those are some of the concerns that we have seen in conducting our audits, making sure that investigation reports are sufficient and thorough. And that kind of incorporates what we have there.
Okay,
So George, did you have anything to add? If not, I think we have to toss it back over to Dr. Ramsey.
No, that was good. Thank you.
So thank you, MDOT and MTA, and we appreciate that. And back to you, Dr. Ramsey.
Right, thank you, Patrick. And thank you to all of our speakers. So attendees, let's give our speakers a hand. Now, before we move directly into our next session, I want to make an announcement about an upcoming event that's taking place in the new year. The Transportation Research Board will hold a workshop on Sunday, January 9th, 2022, starting at 9 a.m. The topic is trespassing in technology, existing and future detection and mitigation technology. The workshop will cover insight on the existing data available and recent research efforts, along with various technologies that are currently being tested, transit demonstration projects, and a look towards future analysis. So please look out for that event hosted by the Transportation Research Board. Now let's rate this session, and then we'll move right into the NTSB's presentation.